live. Oh, let me pause.
All right. All right. Good evening, good late afternoon, depending on where you are around the world. Good morning. We are so delighted that you are joining us today, for another SIECUS Online. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to have a rich and robust discussion tonight. So get ready. We're going to have time for our conversation, of course, and then plenty of time for you to ask us questions. Let me introduce myself. My name is Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart. I am a proud board member of SIECUS, and I'm also an ordained Christian clergy person based in Philadelphia. I serve as the Director for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs for the Mayor's Office here in the city of Philadelphia. And I moonlight as a professor in theology and religious studies at Villanova University, and I'm a fellow this academic year at Harvard Divinity School. So I'm interested in what happens in congregations, in classrooms, and in the public square generally, particularly as it pertains to our bodies. And so that's what drove me to be interested in the work of SIECUS. And again, I'm a proud board member of this organization. Before we begin our conversation and before I introduce our guests, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping things for you to remember. As you can tell, we're using Zoom webinar. And that means that all of the participants, except for our guests, our panelists, will be muted and your video cameras are turned off. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. We want you to feel free to use the chat function to communicate with us per usual. Now, you remember that if you chat, whatever you type in the chat can be seen by all audience members if you select all participants, or if you want to communicate with just the panelists and the host, you can select that from the drop-down menu. We do expect that everybody will be respectful of our invited guests and respectful of all of the attendees who are also listening in on this conversation. We do have SIECUS staff working behind the scenes to moderate our chat, and we will remove anyone who cannot keep the commitment to being respectful during our time together. The chat is not the only way you can talk back to us. You can also use the Q&A box to submit questions. So if you go down to the lower third of your screen, you'll see Q&A, and you click that and you can type in a question for us. Those questions will be moderated by SIECUS, and those questions will be pulled up for us when we get to the question and answer portion of our conversation. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can, time permitting. If we're not able to respond to your question during the time we have allotted for this event, you can email SIECUS at info, I-N-F-O, at siecus.org with your question, and we'll pass it along to the speakers, okay? We are recording this webinar, so please know that, and we'll make the recording available to everybody who registered for the event, and we're gonna post the recording on the SIECUS website. Again, it's siecus.org. So sometime early next week, look for the recording that will be publicly available on the SIECUS website. As you may know, if you're a friend of SIECUS, during the pandemic, these SIECUS Online events were created as a fundraiser for SIECUS. And so we want to thank you for your support. Tonight's SIECUS Online is being held as a fundraiser for the documentary called The Grove, A Coming Out Story. We'll learn a little more about the documentary as we talk tonight, but you can visit siecus.org/donate to make a contribution to support this documentary. And one of our speakers, Pastor Jeff, will tell us a little more about the documentary, but preview of coming attractions. It's about Pastor Jeff's efforts to lead a conservative and rural Christian community into inclusivity, into full affirmation of LGBTQ plus community members. So please do make a contribution to invest in this documentary. It's such important work. And we'll hear Pastor Jeff talk about that in a few. So we've got that housekeeping out of the way. Oh, I also want to direct your attention to the fact that you can enable closed captions if you need that. Down in the menu there, you'll see show captions, and you can enable that for yourself. So please feel free to do that. If you have any trouble hearing us or understanding us during the conversation, feel free to send us a chat to the host and the panelists, and we'll adjust and moderate our volume accordingly, okay? All right, now we've got housekeeping and administration out of the way. Let me introduce our guests for tonight. Wait a minute, before I introduce the guests, let me introduce SIECUS, because some of you might be new to the organization, and I don't want to take for granted that you know precisely what SIECUS does. So SIECUS was founded in 1964 to be the leading voice for shame-free education on human sexuality. SIECUS was founded to be a champion for sexual and reproductive freedom as an essential part of the human experience. And we at SIECUS assert that sex education is indeed a powerful vehicle for social change. That's why our tagline is Sex Ed for Social Change. We're the only national organization that is solely focused on advocating for the rights of all people to have accurate information, comprehensive sexuality education, and the full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health services. The only national organization to do that work. And so we work on a variety of issues in a kind of interdisciplinary way. We work on racial justice issues and LGBTQ rights issues. We are engaged in the Me Too movement, and we want to convene urgent conversations around consent, around healthy relationships. So we are SIECUS. Again, I'm a proud board member of this organization. And tonight's event, we've titled Affirming Sexual Freedom in Christianity. This is an urgent and timely conversation we're going to have, especially after this week, especially after yesterday. It can feel like the religious movement, some religious movements, some conservative religious movements in our country are intent on rolling back the standard and forcing us into a future where reproductive rights, the rights of LGBTQ folks, the rights of people of color will be diminished, if not completely eliminated. So tonight we're speaking with Christian leaders and religious leaders on this complicated role that Christianity has played in undermining reproductive and sexual freedom. And at the end of the conversation, I hope we turn toward the hope we have, the prospect of advancing a vision of Christianity that protects bodies, protects bodily autonomy for everybody. So that's the conversation we are going to have. And here are our guests. We have the Reverend Dr. Eric Thomas. Eric is a scholar, a pastor, an activist, a brother, and a friend to me. And Dr. Eric's research engages queer of color biblical criticism, Black religious studies, and theopoetics. Dr. Eric is a Louisville Institute postdoctoral fellow and a visiting professor of New Testament and queer studies at the General Theological Seminary of the Episcopal Church in the city of New York. Reverend Dr. Eric is also the interim pastor of Siloam Baptist goodness gracious, Presbyterian Church in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So we are delighted to have you, Reverend Dr. Eric. Pastor Jeff Helpman is here with us. And Pastor Jeff is the pastor of a small progressive faith community called The Grove, and the new owner of an outdoor bar and concert venue in downtown Bryson City, North Carolina. Jeff's spiritual leadership in Bryson City is what inspired that documentary I was telling you about earlier, The Grove, a coming out story. Filmmaker Justin Baker. So we welcome you, Pastor Jeff. We look forward to hearing about your leadership and about that documentary. And then we have Sherry Cook. Sherry is here and is the founding executive director of the nonprofit community outreach program called Wholly Informed Sex Ed, or WISE. WISE originated in First Unitarian Church of Dallas, and WISE delivers the comprehensive Our Whole Lives lifespan sexuality curriculum in schools and in community settings. So thank you, Sherry, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. Let's get right in there. I'm going to start off with this first question directed toward all of you. What's your why? Why are you working towards a Christian faith that is inclusive of diverse sexualities and reproductive rights? What did I miss?
Why don't I start?
Let's start with you, Reverend Dr. Eric.
Thank you, Reverend Naomi. I'm going to start out churchy. So part of my why is because the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Right? The Jesus that I identify with, the Jesus that I understand as always in solidarity with the outcast and the disinherited and those who feel as if their backs are against the walls, came that we would have life and life more abundantly. And this is not life in another lifetime, like after we die, but life in this life. And so the why is affirming and reminding myself and others of that Jesus who is always in solidarity with those bodies we are trying to control, the lives we are trying to limit, the belonging that we think that we have the authority to give or take away. And so I acquired a couple of credentials to say that, at least as it has to do with biblical studies, you can't use the Bible in that way. Not anymore, and not while I'm around.
Stay right there, Reverend Dr. Eric. So what does scholarship, and your scholarship in particular, tell you about how Christians might interpret these ideas of sexual diversity and reproductive rights and racial diversity?
One of the things that I am kind of grounded in is contextual biblical hermeneutics. And so my emphasis is on queer people of color, so racial, ethnic, LGBT folks, people who are dealing with issues of their sexuality, simultaneously with cultural issues of respectability, what, say, Black masculinity means, what Latina femininity is supposed to mean, in terms of histories of colonialism, in terms of histories of segregation, histories of assimilation, of having this kind of white heteronormative male center as this North Star for what is righteous, what is holy, what is smart, what is acceptable. And so contextual biblical interpretation sends us into different directions, like womanist biblical interpretation, post-colonial biblical interpretation, feminist, ecological biblical interpretation, where we're changing the center of our investigation. And we're taking the lives, especially the lives as if we're studying the Bible, the people that Jesus walked with have lives that map onto experiences that we all have, which is why the Sunday experience of the well-crafted sermon can become so meaningful for us. My name is Legion, for there are many of us who are left to cut ourselves with stones, to be living people in dead places, right? And so my work kind of interrogates, why is he there? Who are the people that are invested in keeping him, chained? Similarly, so many of my mentors are womanist biblical interpreters. And so when we read Raquel Letzum's womanist reading of the Gospel of Mark, this whole, it is necessary for the Messiah to suffer, she says, oh, no, for Black women, it's not necessary for us to suffer. We have a whole entire risen Savior who's in the world today. We don't need to get onto crosses that he's already gotten off of. And the ways that unfolds through surrogacy, historically, in terms of the bodies and the lives of Black women, through the faith commitments that Black women have, in spite of this way in which pain is not taken seriously, in which the witness, the belief of the woman is not taken seriously. Hello, Mary Magdalene, I've seen the Christ. These are different kinds of ways that we might be able to understand differently. Our differently abled siblings, and Jesus who asks us, do you want to be made well? Well, but there's no one who can help me into this pool. So I mean, there's a way that we can look at the systems, the healthcare system, the religious system, the people who are supposed to be in charge of caring for the people, were somewhere, having coffee when Jesus had to come in and make the intervention that they were supposed to make. So the ways in that we can look in different ways at our biblical texts and to be able to make the comparisons or the parallels to lived experiences of people whose bodies are always questioned, whose situations are taken up, and then the miracle happens, and then we move on and we kind of forget about them, right? These are the kinds of people who are really, really interesting to me. Mark's gospel, some women followed him from a distance, and who are these women? These are the kinds of questions that, one, animate the kind of preaching and the kind of teaching that I encourage my students to do, but they also connect us to flesh and blood people who find themselves on the margins, who find themselves on the outside, who find themselves kind of carrying the weight, as we think of some of Paul's letters, carrying the weight of the corrections that it's really for the people who have the power to stop doing those things. As opposed to the people who did not have control over their bodies. So that's a long
I mean, you
answer
preach
to your
like
question.
6 sermons right there. I want to just repeat a couple of things for folks who are participating with us tonight. You said that at the core of your work and your scholarship is this notion of changing the center of our investigation as we read the Bible. I thought that was so poignant and so powerful. I remember that a professor, when I was in seminary, asked the question, and it was kind of this arresting question: who might be harmed by the conclusions I draw after I read a biblical passage? Who might be harmed by these conclusions, right? Asking critical questions like that. Thank you so much. Pastor Jeff, I'm going to come to you. You took this step of transforming your church in rural North Carolina into one that is inclusive. What set you on the journey? How did your faith inform that transformation?
Well, first, thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm excited. This is my first opportunity to talk about Henry. We just released just a few weeks ago, and it's been a long journey for us. When I think of the why, my only answer is, if not now, when. Our church here in this small conservative community of Bryson City, North Carolina, we've kind of led the way in some progressive thought and some forward moving things. And this was the next step for us. And we set off a long time ago to say that we were going to lead with love, that we were going to do what we thought we were supposed to do. And this was just the next step for us. And for me personally, it was about 15 years ago. I was in a church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was working with teenagers there, and I was flipping through the channels, and I got on HBO, and there was a documentary about an after-school club for LGBTQ teenagers to just hang out on the streets of New York. It was a small storefront. I think there was a pool table there. They were eating pizza, sitting on a couch, and they were laughing, and they were smiling, and they were just being who they were. And I started this internal, I don't know, tension just that erupted of like, is there a better way? I looked at my faith's traditional response to the LGBTQ, and it wasn't that. It was always, how do we get them into our doors, and then how do we fix them? How do we change them before they leave? How do we lock the doors and then and make them like us? And this wasn't happening here on this documentary. It was just kids being themselves. And I'm like, I want that. I want to create a space like that. And so it started things, just questions started coming. And I was asked to leave that church pretty quick. And I moved down to an even less progressive areas in the middle of the Smoky Mountain National Park, middle of rural Appalachia. And I came down to work with teens here as well. And then just a few years into it, I was asked to lead. We took over, and those questions that I had left Grand Rapids with were kind of shelved for a little while. And then we had a same-sex couple in our church ask one of our elders, hey, would Jeff do our wedding? And one of our elders didn't have an answer to that question. And that set off this conflict within our church leadership, this demand for me to make a statement, to announce where I was. And from there, the dominoes kept falling, and I came to a personal journey of where it ended with full inclusion of the LGBTQ community. And I said, I can't be at a place that's not affirming, and I can't lead a place that's not. And so this is where I'm at. I don't want to go, but this is where I'm at. And so we got a decision to make. And that's kind of what set us going.
Wow. I mean, Jeff, that story just illustrates this is not for the faint of heart.
No.
So we want to do this work of inclusion. We want to make sure that folks have bodily autonomy, certainly within Christian spaces. It ain't for the faint of heart. Thank you so much, Jeff. I want to come to Sherry now. You direct Wise, and you talk about your why. And how the Unitarian Church approaches sex education using a spiritual or faith perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you so much. I feel so privileged to be part of this panel and among all of you. I'm the only lay person here. So I'm also in the state of Texas, which I might say is not a place for the faint of heart right now either. And we are up against a lot of forces here. So on the one hand, I have that to contend with, but the other is I came out of this church that has been inclusive and affirming for so many years. We've had comprehensive sex ed for 40 years in this church. Most people don't even realize this Our Whole Lives curriculum that we teach. It is in some ways one of the best comprehensive sex ed curriculum in the country. And when you listed what does SIECUS stand for, you can almost put that right next to us, the same things. We stand for those things. And so affirming and inclusive and welcoming. We've also had rooms full of LGBTQ kids laughing, hanging out, being themselves. That you might even say that's an owl classroom at our church. These kids are in a place where they feel safe and they can be who they really are. So my Unitarian Universalist beliefs really sort of underlie my why. It's why I got into this work, because we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And that informs everything we do. I'm also an educator, and I've been a teacher for many years. And now my subject just happens to be sex ed, and I love it. I love taking it to the kids. We started a new program yesterday, and it's interesting. Centering the young people actually is a really powerful thing for us, because it's their voices and how they see the world that help us be better educators. So I love what you said about changing the center, and also about living life in this life. Yeah, Reverend Eric, because we believe that very much. Being a Unitarian is a lot like being a person who is spiritual and a person of faith, but who believes that what we do in the here and now is what's the most important thing, right? We're way more focused on justice in this world and in this life. So that informs what we do as a sex ed outreach. We had the OWL curriculum in the church, and we created WISE to take it outside the church. And it's a way for us to live our values in the Dallas community, and it is needed and wanted, and we will take it everywhere that they will have us.
Listen, I know y'all are like the oasis in the middle of the desert. And as a person who's been certified in OWL curriculum through the United Church of Christ, I mean, I'm a witness that this curriculum is fantastic. And, you know, I appreciate this focus on young people. I mean, when we're children, that's when some of these problematic ways of understanding our body and understanding pleasure and understanding sex get kind of enshrined. And so to get kids in the room and talk to kids about their bodies and have them love their bodies then, as opposed to, you know, we who are kind of recovering, is so powerful, so powerful. I want to ask you all this question. You know, we know that the strategic and large scale attack on sexual and reproductive rights in this country has largely been fueled by a theologically conservative Christian interpretation of the biblical text and I would say prescription of morality. So we've got both how we're reading the Bible and using power to prescribe morality and values. But we know that Christianity is not a monolith. We know that Christianity is a faith movement that is internally diverse. There are many perspectives within Christianity, many identities and practices, and also that span the globe, right? Not just centering the United States, but that span the globe. What do you assert that the Christian nationalist perspective is getting wrong? Why don't I start with you, Sherry, this time?
Sure thing. Well, okay, can I repeat something that Reverend Eric said before, because this is the best line ever. They get the Bible wrong. Let's just start with that. So start with that and then say they basically fail to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each individual person. And they create this hierarchy of who's better or not. And our belief, you know, we have sex education, which people can't believe you can have in a church, but we have it. And in a way, it is it's just a counter narrative. So they have created this narrative of negativity and disrespect and hostility toward people who are different. So since they've created that, we've had to come back with positivity and affirmation and saying, you know what, they're wrong. And I think we're just going to have to get a little bit louder with how we say that and say it more, because they definitely have it wrong. And then it's a very negative label that they're actually starting to embrace this notion of being Christian nationalist. And so we have to really get in there right now and affirm what we are for, because we are for things and they seem to be against things.
I love that. You know, it makes me think of that. You don't have to be afraid and miserable to be faithful. Those things are not synonymous, right? You can't quote the joy of the Lord is my strength and then be miserable, and you want everybody else to be miserable. Nobody has pleasure. If I can't have pleasure, you can't either, right? And so, yes, thank you so much for that. Let's go to you, Reverend Dr. Eric.
I'm going to try to make this into a short answer. In addition to getting the Bible wrong, they're not telling the truth. They're just not telling the truth. And I think it's connected with getting the Bible wrong. This is not like some sort of, I've got a PhD and you don't, but like they're just really not telling the truth about just power and patriarchy. I mean, if we start with power and patriarchy, they're just not, they're saying that God wants nationalists, white supremacists to have power and authority, right? And they try to use the Bible as a means to justify that. The unfortunate thing is that the Bible is not helpful. The Bible is not helpful. It's violent against women in the Old Testament and the New Testament. There are few, if any, loving, committed relationships in the Bible. I mean, we can look at David and Jonathan, we can look at Ruth and Naomi, but I mean, they're not loving, committed relationships in the Bible to say God wants this to be. And they're also not body affirming scriptures that we can grab onto. So I can think of, you know, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, but when are we taught that? Right? And are we taught that we're fearfully and wonderfully made in the context of a bodily authority as it has to do with sexual activity? We do have your body as a temple, but that's a power play. Do you not know? So, you know, people aren't taught that their bodies are temples until someone is preventing entrance. So often we don't turn to, you know, 1 Corinthians on sexual matters unless we're trying to do a corrective shaming kind of action with that. And so I'll stop there, but we're not telling the truth.
I so appreciate that. You know, my Hebrew Bible professor, her mantra was just read the Bible. You know, don't quote the Bible, read the Bible, right? Because it is a comprehensive story of the roller coaster that is human life and the mystery that is trying to be in relationship with the divine. It's a full account, right? And so I love that. Tell the truth about the fullness of that account, and then see if you want the Bible to be the blueprint that you're trying to make it to be, right? Love that. Love that. Pastor Jeff, what do you think they're getting wrong?
I think it's something we deal with every Sunday, every conversation we have. It's this idea, what we're getting wrong is that the simple fact that we think we got it right, that our interpretation is the only interpretation, that a few passages in the Old Testament and a few passages in the New Testament and our understanding of a story of a garden becomes prescription for what marriage is and what it's supposed to be. The idea that the Bible is clear is just another way of saying it. How I interpret it is clear, and just we have a track record as a faith, as a church, of getting so many things wrong, from slavery to women and how we treat women, and divorce. So many things that we've changed our mind on, that God's never changed his mind on, but we've changed our mind on. And it's just the fact that this toxic certainty that we believe we got it right is, I think, the thing that we're getting wrong.
I love this. Toxic certainty, right? It wouldn't be faith if we were certain. I'm like, how did make it make sense, right? So I hear you saying we need some kind of spiritual and theological humility, right? That this is all a mystery that is unfolding before us, right? And we dare not say we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I say we have to. I'm sorry. We have to create space. We have to be willing to be wrong, and I think that's what people are afraid of. And it's our approach to our faith, how hard or how strong our grip is on our faith. And Rob Bell talks about this in his book Love Wins, and how we approach our faith is like a brick wall. And the minute we start pulling pieces out of that brick wall that we change our mind on, the wall falls down. But if we were to hold our beliefs more like the springs of a trampoline, is what he says, where there's fluidity, there's space to bend, then it doesn't fall apart, and we don't lose God in the moment. We can keep our faith and keep our God, and see things differently, and we don't throw it all away.
I love that. Not a brick wall, but the springs of a trampoline. Yes. Remember that metaphor. Yeah. Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to what you said also about the Bible is clear on the way that they state that all the time. We have gotten so used to our messages being mediated for us. So we don't read the primary text. We don't read the Bible. So people are willing to accept someone else's interpretation. And that's sort of what this Christian nationalism is. It's an interpretation, and it is wrong, but it's just someone's point of view. But they've been really good at getting it into sort of the general conversation. So that really does take us back to needing to read for ourselves.
Go ahead, Reverend Eric.
And I'd also add to that is that identity is formed by who is harmed by your interpretation. I want to go back to the question that your professor asked. I mean, people are proud of harming people with an interpretation. The Bible says that you should not wear a V-neck black sweater on a Tuesday night, on a Wednesday night, and we form identity with the way that the culture accepts that phenomenon.
Yeah. It's like if you say it with authority, we give it authority. And so I go back to something I think, to Sherry, you said earlier, perhaps we need to be talking more authoritatively about what we know to be true and just and righteous. That is a perfect segue to the next question, which has to do with notions of religious freedom. We have seen this phrase, this concept bandied about like a political football. We understand what guarantees are inscribed in the United States Constitution around freedom of and freedom from religion. But what I'm interested in as a Black queer woman who wears a black V-neck t-shirt on a Wednesday night that says "Woman of the Cloth," I want to critique the idea that our religious freedom, and by our I mean Black religious freedom or queer religious freedom, trans religious freedom, is not as legitimate or as valued or as worth protecting as Christian nationalist religious freedom. What the current discourse around religious freedom does is create a hierarchy of freedoms, a hierarchy of rights. And that is antithetical to the Christian gospel. So what do you think what kinds of perspectives can we shape, can we promote that contend with those conservative Christian voices that want to build this hierarchy of rights and who already seem to have a political head start? Lots of political investment and influence already. Let's go to Pastor Jeff first this time.
I'm going to say this answer, and I'm going to disagree with as well, but it's creating space like this to have these conversations. Where I'm at, I'm in the minority with the way I think, the way I believe. And as much as I want to shake my fist and get angry and just fight, I'm not going to win. I'm not going to have a voice in this community if I don't make space for the others that disagree with me. If I don't, if I just build walls and if I just call them the enemy, or if I just say to those who disagree with me that, well, you just hate gay people, I'm not going to win that way. I'm not going to change minds. I'm not going to make any progress if I do that. And so I want to do that. It's not my personality to do that. But I feel like I have to make space for that. At the same time, I don't want to just say that we're going to agree to disagree. Our issues are too important. These are the value of human life, the reproductive rights of women, the value of people of color. All these things that we're talking about at our church are too important just to say, okay, well, I'd rather be friends with you than fight about it. And I'm at a point where I'm like, we know we have to talk about it because there are lives on the ballot. There are kids in our schools that are afraid now because of the elections that we had last night and the school board reshifting into a more conservative Christian school board at our public schools. Things like that are real, and so we can't just agree to disagree. We can't just run away and ignore it. We have to talk about it, but we gotta have space, though, I think, for those that are at least willing to listen and maybe rethink some things.
Pastor Jeff, I so appreciate you naming this tension, right, that exists. On the one hand, there are ideas and perspectives and perhaps, dare I say, votes that are deeply harmful and violent. And yet, no one is discardable or disposable to God. And so how do we not reify what is being done, which is throwing people away in God's name, while we hold the tension that this action is harmful, this idea is harmful. So I so appreciate you naming that tension. Reverend Dr. Eric.
I will confess it's difficult for me to try to answer the question, like living in New York City, right, where there are so many different places and spaces to go. Like, if we don't want to go here, we'll go there. Like, if you don't want to sell me a wedding cake, then bye, Felicia. We're going to go over here. But I think that kind of the abolitionist way, the folks who work on freedom for all kinds of people have got to help help there to be other options. So I'm specifically thinking about, if and when certain kinds of decisions become kind of unlawful and unsafe in certain cities and certain states, is there a way to go to the adjacent state to do the things that one needs to do? At the level of, will you accept me or will you not accept me in the name of religious freedom? We've got benedictions for that. We could say, now unto him who is able to keep you from falling. So I don't ever need to darken the doorstep of your church with my spouse and our children looking to be baptized, on the one hand. But on the other hand, how do we make sure that there are other options and other choices for people to be able to exercise other kinds of religious freedoms in the name of safety and in the names of health and wholeness? So it's complicated, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you saying that alongside the advocacy we do to dismantle and interrupt harmful policies, we also have to create a web of mutual, solidarity, so that in the meantime, people can be loved the way they need to be loved and be cared for the way they need to be cared for. Thank you so much for that.
We need secondary underground or above ground railroads.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. Sherry, what do you think we can do to contend with this stuff?
Well, this sort of goes back to Pastor Jeff, but part of what I think we have to do is embrace the language and then use it. It has taken me a really long time to come to that, but I think that's part of the solution, at least where I am as a Unitarian, because we have used more secular language, I think, in the past, and people don't understand what we mean. So we're in the midst of needing to reclaim religious language and use it to more positive ends. And that's an education task for us, right? That's something we need to do. And so the other thing, we also have to call things out for what they are. And I feel like we're not calling out Christian nationalism for being rooted in racism, but that it is. So we have to make that connection. People really, I want them to see that, but it gets called, once you put the word Christian on it, they forget the past sort of that came with it. And it's a very freighted label, and people are starting to embrace it. So it's very much in our interest to, like you say, you don't necessarily have to go into an evangelical church and talk there, but just within our own church, start speaking in these terms, and then take our classes and our positive, affirming values out into the world. And when, like you said, especially when you reach the young people with that affirming message, that becomes their identity, right? They become a person who was literally taught empathy. Schools right now are realizing the importance of that. So, it's a matter of teaching a new understanding to people.
Go ahead, Pastor Jeff. Yeah.
So a question I have, our church never cared about politics until I started talking about feminism or Black Lives Matter, or we talked about the LGBTQ. All of a sudden it became, you're too political and you shouldn't be political. It never bothered them when we were saying things that they agreed with. But my question is kicking back at my own answer is, what time or what space are you guys giving, or do we give to those that just, hey, I'm not going there. Hey, this is wrong. This is a sin. This is an abomination. You can't change my mind. What are we responsible for in that, to journey with people or to walk people along or to educate them? How much space and time do we give them?
I so appreciate this question, Pastor Jeff. I mean, as I think about this, I think about my own journey of coming out. And some of the responses I got from certain family members. And so I couldn't be the railing on, protest pastor that I know, I had to be a daughter. I had to be a friend, right? And so asking questions like, what's really at stake here for people who are not moving, are not convinced in the face of new information, in the face, what's at stake for them? Because I do believe I think that people are wrong to reject other people, but they sincerely wrong. They are sincere, right? They are trying to be faithful. And so if I think that they just, what do they stand to lose by changing their mind? And if we can address that, first of all, acknowledge that people are afraid of losing something. And anybody who's afraid of losing something is going to hold more tightly to the thing, right? And so, yeah, for me, whenever I'm lacking in the grace needed to enter conversations with people who deeply disagree and who in fact call me an abomination, I just remember that it wasn't a philosophical or even biblical scholarship driven conversation with, my family members. It was more like, what are you grieving here? Why is this making you so sad? Right? What do you think you're losing? At that level of conversation. And then there's an opening for something else. So I so appreciate you asking that question. Anybody else want to respond to Pastor Jeff's question about what do we do? How do we stop preaching to the choir or to folks who are just needed an invitation to come on over to the warm water of inclusivity? How do we approach folks who seem, kind of stuck in a particular view? Go ahead, Pastor Eric.
I'd like to suggest that there are people who are called to those kinds of connections and community, who will be, I am Black and I am gay and I love the Lord and I know that you don't understand, but I just understand that I love you, I love this church, I love this community, and I'll wrestle with you if you want me to wrestle, I'll make the potato salad. Like, there are people who are called to that kind of graciousness and who are called to that kind of patience and stuff. And I affirm them. I don't know that I'm one of them. I have to confess, but we know people who will stick it out and be I've been out and gay in this church for 30 years and they don't understand it, but they love me and I love them and they're my people. There's a way that the Holy Spirit works it out. I want to acknowledge that these things are complex. I think that we spoke the last time. We all don't wake up woke, right? In other words, many people have to start at a place of, origin and develop into a different kind of understanding. I think that we experienced many of those kinds of transformations in the documentary, right? That you shared with us. And so I'd just like to affirm and call out the folks who are really, really called to have that kind of graciousness, to sit with folks and lean into the tensions of our faith.
Yeah. Sherry?
I love the question of what do people stand to lose by accepting a new reality. And I think they lose their certainty. They are in love with certainty because it makes the world seem a little safer. And the world is not. The world is up and down and it's a really crazy place. And so they're seeking certainty. And some of those folks who won't move, it's because that is their spot of comfort, right? They are very comfortable in that certainty. So the actual way to live in the world, which is in a little more of a liminal kind of place, is really hard for a lot of people. And especially if they feel threatened in some way. So hard. So, I feel like I'm doing the best I can when I just have that one-on-one conversation with that person and try to just assert that they're wrong in a nice way. Because that's like Southern girl thing. I got to be nice about it. But, I no longer let them say it though. So that has been something for me, part of my journey. And most people are on a journey, and they are, like you say, they didn't wake up woke, and it takes a long time and a lot of work to get there. But we've scared some people. Some people have gotten really frightened by the thought that everyone else has become woke and they don't want to be. So yeah, it's sort of, you have to be, like you say, be gentle with them, or like you say, send out the ambassadors who are better at that work.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the late great Reverend Peter Gomes, who used to be the minister at Harvard. I'm blanking on the name of the chapel, but the minister over that over Harvard chapel, and he called it bibliolatry, a worship of the Bible. The book itself becomes the almost like the deity, and not the God of the text, but the text itself becomes God. And so then it's hard. You ripping my God away. You changing my God, right? So absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Jeff, for posing that question, because I think it's so important. I've got one more question for each of you as we turn to notions of hope and the future. I'll start with you, Reverend Dr. Eric. You teach New Testament, queer studies, you're pastoring. What is bringing you hope as you engage your students and as you engage your congregation on how to live into a faith that is free from shame and free from imperialist Christianity? What's giving you hope?
And so one of the classes that I teach is queer John. So we're applying queer hermeneutics, queer theology to the Gospel of John. And what I say to my students who are studying to be priests in the Episcopal Church is, we've got to find a way to make the word flesh and allow it to dwell. In other words, we're not just going to memorize some things and throw it at people like a weapon, but that this understanding of what we're studying actually becomes embodied and it lives with us. It helps change the lives of people. There's also kind of a nerdy theologian in me that is looking forward to Advent, because Advent is like what is coming. Right? And what is coming is justice. What is coming is joy. What is coming is hope. And all flesh shall see it together. So some of that is just living into that, living into this Christmastide where we act as if God is with us. Not that God is angry at us, but that God is with us. And in Epiphany, that God reveals God's self to us in all kinds of amazing ways. And so those are things that give me hope, especially in this time of the year.
Beautiful, beautiful. Pastor Jeff, I am honored and proud to have participated in the documentary about your leadership and your work. Can you talk to us about this documentary and what you hope will come out of people hearing this story?
Yeah. So, man, years ago, I was having a chat with my friend Justin out of he lives in Nashville, but he was with me in the church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we were there together. We both left at the same time, and years later, I was just having a conversation with him and said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking. I think I want to push our church in this direction." And he said, "Can I film it?" And I said, I don't know. Because what I didn't want anyone to think that this was a production or that this was a show, that we were doing this for shock or whatever. But it was the summer of 2021, just got out of COVID, and I was like, man, I'm going to do it. And yes, you can film it. And we started filming right away. I went to a Wild Goose Festival in Hot Springs, North Carolina. And so we started filming some people like Brian McLaren and Stan Mitchell, Ray Waters, Semler was there, Josh Scott, some of these pastors that were already doing these things in their communities, and started asking the questions like, why is this important? Like, why do we need to do this? Why do churches need to move into this inclusion or this affirming position? We came home, we started filming people from our church community. We put cameras in our elders meetings. We sat down with some of the LGBTQ that were coming to the church already, or had been invited to come. We started just telling our personal stories. And then we reached out to people that were not from the area, that were writers and experts and speakers. And you were one of them. We reached out and we said, we want to know, what are your thoughts on this? How could you help us tell this story? And the hope of inviting people from the outside was to show that we're not alone in this, that we weren't just making some decision that was isolated here in our church, but it's a decision it's something that's happening all over our faith, and it's okay. And our little ultimate hope in doing this from the very beginning was just to tell our story out there, to say that if we could do it in this area, conservative Bible Belt Appalachian community, that we hope that you can too, or just find the encouraged to come on the journey and somehow just give them hope that it can be done, and that it can be beautiful, because what it's done here is beautiful. It could have went sideways, and there are times that it felt that way. But what we have now is a lot of beautiful stories coming out of this, and more stories of people showing up every week saying, just thank you for the freedom to be able to worship for the first time in a place where I could be myself and fully known. And that was worth it. Every friend that left, every friend that I see at the grocery store or at school or anywhere we go and walked away, that don't speak to us anymore, that don't talk to our kids anymore, it was worth that next story of someone coming and saying, I finally have a place that I can worship and be myself and feel loved. And we would do it all over again. I might make some better decisions, but I don't regret the decision we made, and I love the story, and I'm really excited about it getting out, and I want to get it out to as many people can, just so they, again, maybe find hope that they could do it themselves.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Remember that all the proceeds from this event will be contributed to support this film, The Grove, a coming out story. So please visit SIECUS's website /donate to invest in this work, so that people can be inspired and encouraged. Sherry, you're part of a network called Sacred that's working to counter these Christian attacks on sexual and reproductive rights. Can you tell us more about Sacred? Who's involved and what y'all are doing?
Sure thing. So Sacred is the spiritual alliance of communities for reproductive dignity. And it is a fairly new, it's national, it's an interfaith organization. So it's a collaboration of individuals and churches that got it together. Part of it came out of the Faith Voices for Justice in Texas, actually. And we've definitely got Reverend Erica Forbes has been part of it, and Sonia Miller, Angela Williams, a number of faith leaders, and then the Reverend Daniel Cantor from First Unitarian was part of it also. So all these voices sort of got together and they said, let's see if we can't create a national network of churches and congregations that believe in reproductive dignity. And then they created a curriculum for us to study within the congregation, and then a designation program. So churches that do the work and decide they want to be designated as a congregation for reproductive dignity can do so. So we are diving into the work right now. We're teaching the classes. We are having incredible conversations and learning so much. And basically trying to create moderate progressive voices for reproductive dignity. And that is our hope, is that if we have enough of us, that we will be able to be heard, right? We want to get our voices out there and counter these others. So there's a lot of engagement that's needed, that's based in our faith and not this negative faith that we keep hearing about. And really, for better or for worse, a recognition that this work is going to take decades. So we are hopeful because we are dedicated to the work in the long term. And sometimes it would be easier to be hopeful if it were a short-term project, but we have to think, literally have faith in the future that we will make things better with this kind of an outreach.
Wow. Well, I see a lot of and hear a lot of hope in the midst of this season of turmoil. So thank you all so much. That organization is sacred. There's someone in the chat asking about the name of that organization. Sherry, would you say the full name again for us? Uh-oh. Go ahead and unmute, Sherry.
You know, I can type it in there, the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity. I think it's sacred.org, if I'm not mistaken, their website.
Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you for such a rich conversation. And I want to open up the floor now for our audience to engage. Again, you can use the chat to submit any questions that you have, or you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to make sure they're addressed during this next bit of time. I want to pull up a question that has come up in the Q&A. This is from Zach. Zach says, I am a social policy research master's student working on a short mini documentary about how LGBTQ plus sex education policy can be reshaped or reimagined to be more inclusive for all, keeping the reality of Christian concerns in mind. What messaging or what kinds of messaging have you found to be most effective for sharing this message with a broader or larger Christian community? And for context, Zach says this is going to be targeted at Missouri citizens. So queer, trans, LGBTQ plus sex education policy shaped to be applied to a broader Christian community. Is that, I think I got your question right, Zach. What are some suggestions for messaging that can be resonant with a broader Christian community? Zach says, okay, we got the question right. Anybody want to jump in?
Zach, thank you. But thinking about, being a person of a certain age, remembering kind of the gay men's health crisis and gay men of African descent, talking about safer sex practices and use of condoms and kind of the discretion that is necessary when other substances are around and available. And I'm sure that those kinds of things to think about when you're engaging in sexual activity might be able to be broadened to a multi what is the word, a broader audience. A broader audience. It's hard. I'm thinking also about these PrEP commercials, these the kind of medication that you take that says this isn't prescribed for people born as female, but blah 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 blah. So I think that there are ways that a lot of the advertising and the public relations around safer sex practices and perhaps some other kinds of things might be able to be modified for the community. That's my hope, my guess.
And I want to chime in and say, I want to point back to what you said, Eric, about moving the center. So I think we've been conditioned to believe that the stuff that looks queer ain't for people who ain't queer. But the whole idea, I mean, listen, I'm queer. I'm married to another beautiful Black woman, okay? We got bills. We got, house repair stuff breaks down. We got to fix it. We got a teenager we're trying to, right? So part of what has happened is we have been told that there's something pathological about what they do over there, and that doesn't apply to us. But what if, in fact, the stuff that's designed for LGBTQ plus folks is broad enough and comprehensive enough for everybody? I mean, I hear what you're saying, Zach. I hear what you're saying. And right, we interrogating the need for a kind of heteronormative aesthetic so that it can resonate with people who are not queer or not trans is work I think we got to do. So I would just chime in. Nobody asked me, but I would just chime in and say, what if we made that normative and followed the lead of LGBTQ plus sex ed? So that, I think, in concert with what Eric is suggesting. Anybody else want to weigh in on Zach's question?
Make it economic. That's what gets everyone's attention, right? So your business will do better if you appeal to everyone, right? And then that might change some policies.
I love what Francie, hey Francie, I love what Francie said in the chat. The same way that accessibility makes the world better for everybody, right? Yes. Okay, I saw a question in the chat around how people can view the film. I'm trying to scroll up. How can get screened? And so we're bringing into the room now the filmmaker and Justin Baker. And so Justin and Pastor Jeff, can y'all together answer this question about how people can have host screenings of the Grove documentary?
Yeah. Hi,
Justin. Go ahead, Justin.
Right now, we're doing kind of some private screenings. It's not released yet. We are signed with a streaming service that will be releasing it sometime soon. Hopefully, we'll find out a date soon. Hopefully, but we are kind of just setting up private screenings based on interest. And so, if anybody's interested, we'd love to do that.
What's the way they would do that?
So should people reach you by the church's website? How do people reach out to you to express interest in a screening?
Yeah, so you can email me. It's just justin@storypreserved.org is the best way to reach me.
Thanks, Justin. We'll make sure that. Okay, yeah, put that in the chat for people can see. Please get in line to do a screening, to work with Justin and Pastor Jeff to get a screening in your area at your organization. Yes. I see another question in the chat or in the Q&A box, someone inquiring about, we've been talking about Christians, Christianity, Christian nationalism. Let's be precise. Let's define our terms a bit. They're asking, what's the definition of a Christian? Yeah, because we said that Christianity isn't a monolith, and we have been using Christian as an umbrella term. How do we know a Christian when we we see what? Oh, that's a whole other webinar. Anybody want to tackle this? What, in your view, could rightly be called a Christian? Listen, I might not be Christian if you start naming. Help. But I think the question brings up, right, the point that precision of language is helpful. And if Christianity is not a monolith, then can we be more precise in how we name what's going on in Christianity? Thoughts?
So many. The song says they will know that we are Christians by our love, by our love. They'll know that we are Christians by our love. How is that love expressed? How is that love embodied? Especially since we have all of these scriptures that say love God, love neighbors, love foreigners, love orphans, love widows, love, love, love. How can you say that you do not love a brother or a sister who you can see, and say that you love God who you cannot see? So what the world needs now is love, sweet love, right? So that's one of the things. But also, again, it's truth telling. The in the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s comes the transatlantic slave trade. There were people who were brought to North and South America in slave ships named Jesus, in ships named Santa Maria, Saint Mary. So I mean, there's an extent to which we've got to tell the truth about how African people were disembarked in places like Havana, Cuba, and Jamaica and Haiti. They were baptized and then sold into slavery. That was a Christianity. There is a Christianity where the founding fathers say, America is the city set upon a hill. So there's and honestly, there's a picture of the Ku Klux Klan seated in front of a sign that says Jesus saves. You can Google it, right? So we have to be precise about this Christianity that we are defending, and we connect this Christianity to a country that is built on land stolen from people who already lived here, and labor by people who were brought here and people whose wages were taken advantage of here. But in a more positive definition, I'm always looking for Jesus who is in solidarity with the least of these, with the brokenhearted, the downtrodden, and those who will do greater works than the things that we read that he did, because he's going to his Father. And I guess I'll turn the mic off there.
There's a story in our faith tradition that just retells about a man that was left on the side of the road beaten, and two believers, two religious elites passed by this man and leave him for dead, and then this third person, who was someone who didn't believe right, who didn't check all the boxes of the faith, took the time and energy to meet the man's needs and take care of him. And I believe, as Dr. King says, the Levite and the priest asked the question, if I'm a man, what will happen to me? But it was the Samaritan that asked, "Don't help this man. What will happen to him?" And for me, my faith has to be one that will surrender my comfort and surrender my reputation to help someone in need, help the other, help the marginalized. And for me, that's what a Christian does, is they put the other first. And that's what it defines it for me, is willing to lay down what other people might think about me or what might happen to me. What will happen to them if I don't?
Is there and I ask you all this, especially as clergy, is there a theological definition of Christianity versus the be a good and loving person definition? Because do you have to believe that this person died and rose again and is the literal Son of God? What part of that is the Christianity? And what this is my question too.
Ooh, I ain't touching that. I mean, that's what I certainly was given a set of beliefs I had to assent to qualify. But my faith journey has evolved so that I am less and less concerned with doctrinal assent, and more compelled to follow Jesus, which for me is about doing what Jesus did, how Jesus did it. But other folk would be like, no, doctrine matters, no, creeds matter, etc. So that's why I think this internal diversity is beautiful and is tricky to navigate. Because if at some level you believe that I'm not even a Christian, then you can diminish the validity of my testimony, of my scholarship, of my witness. So I think, Sherry, that's precisely the question. I know Pastor Jeff had another question he wanted to get in there before we say goodbye.
Yeah, and just to repeat what she was saying, I think every church you're going to find a different definition of what that is and what it means to them. And for many, we're not Christian. We have people online every day talking about how we're no longer a real church or a Christian church of these things, and it's not whether or not we're good at loving people. It's just we don't check the boxes of the doctrine that they hold to. And it's unfortunately, so to answer your question, Jerry, I don't think there is a theological definition. I think that word is something that was made up later on. And so we've defined it in a way what we want it to be. And it's a word that I disassociate with more and more every day, it feels like. But yeah. My question, I spoke to you guys a little bit about this before, but as a cisgender, straight, white male, I feel almost arrogant that I'm speaking to this because of what people like me have done to people called women, to the LGBTQ community. And it feels disingenuous that I get to be up here opening the door to let people in or making room at the table, like it's my table, like it's my door to open. And so I don't think I'm asking for permission, but I'm wrestling with this idea that why do I do this? Shouldn't I be the one sitting down now and giving the mic to someone else? Because my value's never been on the ballot. I've never been, unwelcome at a church before. And all of a sudden, things are shifting and changing. And I feel dirty sometimes when like that I shouldn't be the one saying these things, that I'm the reason why we're here anyways. And now I'm trying to pretend that, that I made it right. That makes sense. Does that?
Well, I would just say, we said this before, don't diminish the value of your witness. Your particularities, your situatedness is such an important witness in this moment. I want more white, straight, cis men to get some clues about this stuff, and proudly put some skin in the game in the way that you've done that, Pastor Jeff. So I just want to offer you some encouragement that it's like, no, I want you to put your body on the line so I don't have to. Not that I won't, but I'm just saying that we can now together put our bodies on the line and spread the risk and share the risk. And then the other thing I would say is, part of the system that we're trying to dismantle, it thrives on sort of taking of more power than is due, right? What we're not saying disempower you so that I can get more power than I should have as a single human being, right? It's about everybody having the power that is already gifted to them and not taking on more power by disempowering others. And so it's not submitting to a powerlessness, but it's it's like right-sizing power. Like power in itself is not the enemy, but the outsizing of power, the distribution of power in ways that breed injustice is part of the problem. So the right-sizing of power says, you have power. The Spirit of the Lord has given you power and use it, right? So that's just my little sermon to you, Pastor Jeff, and to anybody else who's joining us who might have some similar questions about, like, am I taking up too much space? Am I, right? Everybody should be able to take up the space that they take up. No more, no less. That's what we want. So Francie is dropping some knowledge in the chat. Please see the chat. Please see Zach dropping knowledge in the chat. Anybody else want to weigh in? Yep, go ahead.
The Maya Angelou of it all is that you do the best that you can, and then when you know better, you do better, right? So in parallel conversations, we're talking about dismantling white supremacy and white privilege. White privilege is not going away, but what do you do with your privilege? What decisions, who do you give access to? Who do you share access with? In the name of doing this larger work, in the name of making the table more hospitable. I think someone earlier said we've got to reevaluate that table and who's supposed to be on it or at the head of it. There are many gifts and there's one Spirit, right? And so use your gifts to encourage and support the gifts of others. And you'll find that those gifts come in woman-identified bodies and trans-identified bodies and Black-identified bodies and non-binary identified bodies and intersex identified bodies in your community, in your state, all over the country, coming to find you because you're doing the work that allows others to do their work.
Yes, right? Yes. on that note of encouragement, as we look with hopeful, perhaps cautiously hopeful, eyes toward the future about the long game work in front of us to do, I want to say thank you to our panelists, Sherry, Eric, Jeff. Thank you, Justin, for making a cameo appearance. Thank you to the SIECUS staff behind the scenes supporting this effort. And thank you to all of the audience members who are watching the SIECUS Online, whether you watch this in real time, you're with us in real time, or you watch this later. Thank you for supporting this work. Go to SIECUS.org, learn about our work, donate to the effort to spread the Grove documentary all over the place. And we'll see you next time. We will see you next time for the next SIECUS Online. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.